welcome to A Look Inside. I'm your host, Demetria Head, and we are back for part two with author Richard Harland and book two in the Farron trilogy, Farron and the Doomsday Mission. Welcome.
Great to be here. I've been looking forward to this. We had such a good talk last time. I'm sort of just dying to go on with it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this is going to get meaty, very meaty. So, starting with part one, because I just had to get some questions in on all four parts of book two. So the sea folk. So we're at Muriel, and she's quietly observing the angelic army in combat, and she's deeply moved because she can no longer be a part of this. How does her silent yearning to rejoin the angelic ranks and her reflection on what she's lost reveal the tension between her past identity and her new earthly mission with Farron?
Well, it's sort of, I'll have to be honest here. That was a change from the way I originally wrote it. The way I originally wrote it, I thought, did I say last time that book one was originally written as a standalone?
I don't
No, I don't think I
recall
did.
saying that.
Yeah, because that kind of made issues for me writing book two, because book one I opened it up when I realized I was doing a sequel. Then I
Mhm.
sort of opened it up, and the obvious way to open it up was setting up the residual alliance. So
Mhm.
originally it was going to start with Ferren as the center and telling the story of building the residual alliance.
Mhm.
But that is actually not what's turned out to be the center of book two. And I realized actually I'm telling Muriel's story quite as much as Farron's, and perhaps even more so. Muriel's
Yeah.
story is kind of like the generator of what happens.
Hmm.
And Farron's story is important, but it doesn't actually generate the key developments in the same way that hers does. So that was a whole change to actually, it was a bit of a risk having set Farron up as the main point of view character to actually kick off book two with a different character, with Muriel, even though we know who she is. But
Yeah.
I realized that her state of mind is actually what's important,
Hmm.
because her state of mind early on, her yearning for heaven, the fact that she feels, you know, she was at the end of book one, she was gung ho for carrying, building the residual alliance. It
Hmm.
was all looking straight forward, but the important thing is that by the start of book two, she's actually missing heaven. She's missing that community of the angels where they are all together and touching spirit to spirit. There's a sort of a communal thought almost, and she can't have that with anyone anymore.
Yeah.
And she can't even communicate with residuals quite. Ferren can communicate with his own people, but people of the same type as he is. But Muriel is different, and she's feeling lone and
Yeah.
an outsider. And her state of mind at the beginning is crucial. So that's why I sort of realized, even though it's a bit of a strange step to take, I've got to start it off with Muriel and her feelings about the whole thing in chapter one.
Yeah.
You see the logic as a writer yourself. You see
Yes.
sometimes you kind of find that the true focus of a story isn't quite where you thought it was the first time.
Hmm.
And the first time, the first version, I was thinking it runs on with the same thrust, the same motivation that ended book one. But
Hmm.
in fact, it doesn't, because it's got a whole new kind of development, and Muriel's mental state is a big part of that.
Yes. Yes, you can tell throughout. I really felt for her at one point.
It's good because, she's spent the first book, in a way, being someone you can sympathize with.
Yeah.
She started out as like not a particularly sympathetic character, and by the end, she's become more sympathetic. But now you've got to
Yes.
get deeper. You've got to
Yes.
really share what she's experiencing.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit more about the residual alliance that you mentioned. So Farron seems optimistic about the growing residual alliance, and where he proudly speaks of uniting 17 tribes. What does this moment say about Farron's evolution as a leader, and how does Mariel's more grounded response underscore the differences in how each views the mission ahead?
Well, I mean, things are going Farron's way.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
that's he's succeeded in a way beyond their wildest dreams. They are managing to convert tribe after tribe to
Hmm.
joining the alliance and turning against the artificial human who rule the world. So things are going his way, and Miriel is getting left outside. I mean, that's the trouble for her. She's less and less necessary.
Yeah.
The residual, she's recognised that the residual tribes, Femin will try and make them like an angel, but an angel as a celestial is still a scary kind of thing, and they're never going to relate to her in a natural kind of way.
Yeah.
And so she's more and more feeling pushed to the side,
Hmm.
and Femin is on the at the same time gaining a new power because this actually comes back to did I say last time that I was a university lecturer for quite a while?
Yes.
Yeah, I had this period of writer's block. I always wanted to write fantasy fiction, but I never managed to finish any single book that I started for like I've still got a whole cupboard of manuscripts unfinished at home here that I could never manage to finish. And I also had a sort of an academic side to my head. I mean, it really is. I'm always schizophrenic. I mean, I've got one side that's very visual. It's
Hmm.
like sort of like sees stories like movies, and the other side kind of abstract and logical. So I
Yeah.
had an academic possibility, and I became a uni lecturer, and that's what I did for many years, for 10 years,
Yeah.
and that sort of well, it carried me through my period of writer's block until I actually got unblocked. But why did I start talking about being a university lecturer? It had to do with that's right, public speaking, exactly. I sort of discovered that I could really do public speaking. I liked audiences. I could talk. I could sort of get that buzz back from an audience. I could really kind of come up close to an audience, even though I was on stage and they were down below.
Hmm.
And that sort of feeling is what I used for Ferren because he discovers that he's been an outsider. He's been generally uncommunicative with the rest of his own tribe until the very end. He sort of became important at the end, but now he discovers that he has a talent for talking to other people in other tribes and communicating why they need to join the residual alliance and why they need to join the human that are doing such dreadful things to them. And so I could use that. I mean, it's the old thing about writing. I mean, you know yourself. If you can feel it in yourself, the experiences you work best from are the ones that you have in yourself. You
Hmm.
can create something if you feel it strongly in yourself. And that's kind of been the secret for me all along to do that with fantasy, to draw little things from real life and turn them into things that happen in fantasy fiction even though I've never experienced, I've never talked to tribes of residuals in real life, and I've never had to convince them that the human are a bad species doing terrible things and sort of taking apart the bodies of people who are supposedly there for military service. So it's outside my experience completely, but I do know what it's like to stand on stage and feel that buzz of audience response. So I
Yeah.
could work with that. And that's in a way what he discovers. As they go around creating the residual alliance. So
Mm.
he's on the up and up. Mirail is the one who's left outside because she's not needed as much anymore.
Yes, and I think you alluded to that, like, well, when it came to her character, and her character kind of alluded to that, like she was less significant or less needed now.
Mm.
So let's
Which is
let's
paradoxical because she also has to come more into the center of the story, even
mm-hmm.
while she's
Oh
getting
yeah,
pushed out of Farron's story.
right, right. So let's talk about Seafolk Islands, the Seafolk Islands. During the dangerous crossing, Farron battles the attacking seagulls with sheer will, even resorting to seaweed as a makeshift weapon to save Muriel. What does this moment reveal about Farron and Muriel's deepening trust in each other, and how does it show their complementary strengths in moments of crises?
Well, they do work together really well there, and they have learned to work well together. I mean, we have that impression that they've learned to work well together, even though there's this divergence building up between them. They
Mm,
do work well as a team. And yeah, that was actually interesting that everyone remembers the seagulls chapter. I mean,
yeah.
that's the war with
Yes.
the seagulls. But I made a change there too because I just realised that there are really two stages of fighting back that Ferren and Morale do, and the first is when Ferren starts using the seaweed like a whip to whip away the seagulls,
Hmm.
and originally that was the climax, and that was what worked, and that was what saved them and drove the seagulls off. But I realised when I came to do it again that actually the most dramatic thing isn't the sort of the pure action sequence, is the fact that Mirail does something which became the climax. She, in desperation, she's just frantic, and Ferren is kind of drowning down there. And if he sticks his head up above the surface of the water, he'll be dive bombed by the seagulls, so rip him to
Yeah.
shreds. And she spreads her wings.
Yes.
And it's a simple thing, but like you realize that's what an angel could do. And her wings are so much bigger than the seagulls. That
Yes.
scares them off. That really frightens them. But
Mhm.
that actually that whole episode came from long ago, going, like I say, the things you work from best are your own experiences. And in some ways, I believe that the best experiences, the most powerful experiences, are the ones when you have them for the first time, which
Mhm.
means when you're young. I use a lot of experiences I remember from childhood, and that actually goes back to when I was a kid. Growing up, you can tell I'm English, so everyone can tell that from my accent. Even though I live in Australia now, I was born in England. And I used to go birds nesting, which I'm not real proud of in retrospect, but all the kids did in those days. And we used to climb up trees and sort
Mhm.
of go for birds' nests. And we used to try and take one egg as a sample that would be part of our collection. That's what I'm not proud of. But this one time I got sort of up to the top of the tree and kind of looking inside where the nest was and kind of getting in. And all of a sudden, the birds attacked me. And they really attacked me. And I was blank, blank, blank scared. I mean, I was like really panicking, and I just realised compared to birds, we haven't got much protection at all. If birds really
Yeah.
decide to attack you, you don't there's not a lot that a human being can do against it.
Yeah.
So I drew on that, and that was a real fear that I remembered.
Yeah. You know what? In that entire scene, I could imagine it because I'm like, yeah, I didn't realize how vicious seagulls could be. But then again, even the ones here can tend to be a bit aggressive, especially if you have food at a picnic.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
that was a very vicious scene.
yeah, in Australia now, the magpies are the real
Okay.
terror. Magpies, I don't know if they're the same as magpies in Australia, but they're different to magpies in England.
Okay.
They have this beautiful singing voice, but nesting time, if you go anywhere near their nest, and I'm talking about in the same park,
Mm.
they will dive bomb you. And kids going to school wear ice cream buckets on their heads to protect
Mhm.
them from
Oh, wow.
magpies because they don't just scare you. They actually dive and stick their claws and their beaks into your top
Oh,
of your head.
you know what that reminds me of? I don't know if you've ever seen the classic movie, is it called The Birds?
It's Hitchcock,
The
yeah,
Birds
yeah,
or the
yeah. I was trying to think actually, do seagulls come into that? It's set on it's seaside sort of setting, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you about the scene when you mentioned Muriel spreading her wings, and I do remember reading in the book they were 5 feet apart on either side, and it's said that she typically uses them in ceremonial events. So, what did you want? Was there anything in particular you wanted readers to glean from that? You know, her revealing that out of desperation to ward these seagulls off. Was it spiritual? Was it symbolic?
I guess, I guess I mean, she's lost many of her angelic powers,
Hmm.
and obviously one of them is the power of flight, which depends not on her wings,
Yeah.
but on her aura. But
Hmm.
she still has her wings. And so, yes, it is a kind of a recovery of a power as an angel, even though angels don't particularly need it themselves in
Hmm.
fighting, but she discovers that. So
Hmm.
yes, it's her recovering something, I think, that well, she's never really thought about before because
Yeah.
angels' wings are in the book for ceremonial purposes, not
Mhm.
for flying.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Um, During the private moment between Muriel and Farron, she urges him to deliver the speech to the tribe on his own, and she argued that the residual alliance needs tribes that believe in themselves. What turning point does this signify for both Farron and Muriel, and how does Muriel's choice to step back into the background shift the dynamic of their mission and their relationship?
Um, well, two things there. It's part of Mirail. I was talking earlier about her being pushed out, but that's not actually fair. It's not her being pushed out, it's that she can see that
Yeah.
Ferren does the job better than she can, so she steps back,
Hmm.
which, doesn't make it any more saddening for her, but it's by her own free choice. But she also tells Ferren that he needs to encourage the tribes to do things on their own. It's not enough for him to tell them what to do. There's a selector, the selectors who come and take away one member of the tribe for military service.
Hmm.
And we all know what that means. It's not a nice thing that's going to happen, but military service. And Fallon could kind of cope with the selector on his own. He and Miral could probably do something against the selector on their own. But the important thing is that the tribe learns to do it on their own because it's not just about stopping a selector, it's about believing in themselves. And
Hmm.
that's the important thing. And that's what Miral advises him to do. And it's kind of that's another stage in the
Hmm.
building up of the residual alliance is
Yeah.
getting the tribes to actually discover their own motivation,
Hmm.
not to discover, oh, we can do it. And that was actually quite a big thing to have to see. I guess the problem with the residual alliance
Hmm.
is that it has to be a slow thing. And if you think about what it would be in real life, it's I've tried to convey the sense that the tribes really are locked in their mindset
Hmm.
in the same way that the people were in book one.
Yeah.
They've got a fixed way of thinking. It's very, very hard for them to get out of it. And
Hmm.
yet now suddenly they do. And they have to do it fairly quickly because, after all, we don't want to have Ferren and Muriel spending 6 months there and me doing endless chapters of
Yeah.
gradually winning them over. That's got to be fairly quick. That was an issue with this book in many ways, is how to make things happen dramatically.
Yeah.
And I guess the key thing is that well, there's the city under the sea for the sea folk, which is the old ruins just visible through the waves of the civilization, the Western civilization that existed there 1,000 years ago, and which has since been lost ever since the war between heaven and earth broke out. But they still believe in it. They still believe they can recover what the lords of the earth used to have. They call them the lords of the earth. Femin's tribe calls them the ancestors, the old ones to the nesters, but they can recover that. And that gives them, there's something in themselves that can respond to Femin, as well as the truth about what the human people actually do to people chosen for military service. But it gives them a growing point. They can swap over fairly quickly to believe, oh, we can do this because our ancestors did this way back in the
Yeah.
past. This is what they were capable of. Look, we can do it too. And when they defeat a selector and actually destroy a selector, wow, they've done it.
Hmm. Yeah. I was actually going to ask you more about the kingdom under the waves when
Hmm.
Farron glimpses the submerged ruins. Um,
Right, I call it City Under the Sea, didn't I? It's the kingdom under the waves, right? It's terrible when you forget the titles of your own book. Yeah.
at first, I'm like, okay, is that the same thing? I have a kingdom under the waves, but then I made a note of it. So he envisions this future where the residual alliance rebuilds the glory of their ancestors. How does this vision fuel Farron's growing sense of destiny? And why is the Sea Folks' shared reverence for the past so important to building a unified resistance?
Well, yeah, that's in a way I've kind of answered it, but let me go on.
Yeah.
The it's it enables the scene, the episode with the sea folk to become dramatic. It I guess for the first thing, Femin and Mirail have saved the sea folk from the seagulls. So
Hmm.
they've shown that you can actually fight back against the seagulls and win.
Hmm.
So that kind of is the first proof that residuals don't have to be this hopeless, beaten down,
Yeah.
caroling lot of people. You can actually you've got the power if you just believe in it.
Hmm.
And then Ferren can draw on the ancestral beliefs that they have, which is that there was once a much more powerful civilization
Hmm.
that had all these abilities and capacities. And although it's lost, we are their true descendants and we can get back to it. And that's, I guess, what Femin teaches them to do
Yeah.
by being able to defeat the selector and destroy a selector.
Hmm. So let's talk about Os. Is it Osmodai?
Asmodai, yeah.
Osmodai. Okay.
Yeah. Asmodai, I should say, I think I said before, I did all this research into angelology and
Yeah.
angels and fallen angels and so on. And one of the great things for an author with this material, and there are hidden masses of it, it's all kind of forgotten. It's like a forgotten world, but it's still you can unearth it.
Hmm.
And one of the things about it is that so much is uncertain and ambiguous. In other words, there is a version of Asmodai as a good angel and a version of Asmodai as a bad angel,
Hmm.
which means I can play around. I'm not committed to one thing or the other, which is
Yeah.
very important, as you know, for this particular story.
Hmm.
And the same with a lot of other things. I mean, it's an author's ideal dream to have all this inspiring stuff, but at the same time to be able to pick and choose. If I want uh, a level of heaven, I can,
Yeah.
and I'm creating heaven, I can sort of take my choice between different versions to
Hmm.
work into the story.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Asmodai, we'll call him a good angel because he looks like a good angel. But
He's definitely an angel.
well, he's definitely an angel. He's a very beautiful angel, and
Yeah.
when he first appears, he seems to be a well. He gives Mirail. I mean, we've seen the setup where Mirail is feeling an outsider, feeling pushed out from the what's important and what's happening. She's tagging along with the residual alliance, but she's no longer the force
Yeah.
making it happen. And she's missing heaven. She's
Hmm.
wishing she could go back and have that feeling of communal love that used to exist.
Hmm.
And then Asmodai turns up, and all the other angels have rejected her, typically with disgust, because the idea that an angel would live on the earth and lose some of her powers and actually become slightly physicalized.
Yeah.
Oh, disgusting! That's corrupt. That's degrading. So all the other angels kind of not only condemn her for being on the earth, but they sort of just have this instinctive revulsion. But
Mm,
Asmodai doesn't. He shares sympathetically her experience. He feels she's been badly treated. He explains to her that she deserves better.
mm,
You turn to someone like that. I mean, if you're in Muriel's position, it's very. I needed Mirael to be totally convincing in the way that she's attracted to Asmodai, and I think it's the context that does it. It's not. It's he's beautiful and sympathetic and kindly and gentle and all of those nice things, but also she needs someone like that who kind of represents the heaven that she's sort of lost. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this, but I remember one time it's when I moved from Newcastle in New South Wales to Sydney in New South Wales, and I'd had a wonderful time in Newcastle. All sorts of things had gone right for me,
mm,
and um, I just it was a happy time. It was one of the happy periods of my life. And I came to Sydney and everything went downhill. I felt a bit like Muriel, like an outsider. Nobody particularly wanted to know me, big
oh,
city,
wow.
that feeling in a big city. And I sort of had met someone a girl from at a party in Newcastle
Mhm,
who I really liked her.
mm,
But in a sense, it was never meant to be. I mean, there was too many differences between us, and yet I kind of fell in love not with her, but with the happy time in the past. She
mhm.
sort of represented that happy time in Newcastle that I wished I could get back to. And I don't know if you've ever had that, but like where the thing that you fall in love with isn't simply the person, but what they
Yeah,
represent, where they
yeah.
come from, the happy time that you had in the past.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's what Asmodai is to Muriel. I never said that before. I never even thought that quite clearly before. But that Newcastle memory just came suddenly. Yeah, it didn't end well, I'm afraid. It didn't end well because really didn't start for the right reasons. But
Oh,
it was
wow.
quite intense for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely understand. So Muriel has this visionary dream, and she's trying to communicate with the angels of heaven by flashing her golden hair, but she ends up unintentionally drawing the attention of Asmodai. So, what does that scene reveal about Muriel's longing for redemption and the delicate boundary between spiritual desire and forbidden ambition?
Yes, I suppose. I mean, I don't know if I'd say ambition as so much like just the desire to be back in the community of
Yeah.
angels. I mean, that's important in the novel. They touch spirit to spirit, and that means they kind of sense what's in each other's minds. It's like a really, really close-knit community where everyone is kind of in sympathy with everyone else, almost like they're singing from the same song sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what she misses. She wants that sense of togetherness again,
Mm-hmm.
and that's that's what Asmodai originally represents for her. That togetherness, that happy time that she's lost of feeling good with the other angels. She's never been an important angel. She's only been a junior angel, but she was part of the angelic choir. She was
Yeah.
part of the totality, and now she's really in exile.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
eating the food of mortals. Is that
exactly.
correct?
Well, she went through a whole period of feeling guilty about that, and now she kind of accepts that she needs mortal sustenance, and she can't give it up. And in the end, of course, she doesn't want to give it up. But in
Yeah.
short term, yes, she would dearly love to be able to get back up into heaven.
Hmm. You briefly touched on this, the differences with in how the other angels perceived her. So when Osmo died, does visit her and he has this compassion for her, um, how does his unofficial visit differ from her previous interactions with angels like Gethel and Asael and Uriel? I don't know if I said those correctly. I hope I did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's all the way that you'd say it, as far as I know. Uh, well, I haven't checked on the pronunciation, but they all sound right. Yeah, that is the contrast. That Asmodai is out of the blue, out of nowhere. He seems like total redemption because he sympathizes and cares for her in the way that the others haven't. The others have their very rigid lockdown morality, and she's gone against it. She's outside it. She isn't one of them.
Hmm.
She doesn't belong, and that's just the worst feeling in the world. To
Yeah.
just be excluded as not belonging. So Asmodai, well, he doesn't say it straight out to begin with, but little by little he starts to hint that he might be able to get her back up into heaven. He
Mm.
might have a way of getting her where she belongs.
Yeah. And advocating for her.
Yeah, advocating.
And then we learn more about Asmodai and how he was demoted in ranks, because of his controversial weather research during the weather wars, which I found very interesting to get, some of the backstory of Asmodai. Um,
Yeah, that the Weather Wars actually
mm,
came into book one, and they came into book one just as something in the period of history that Muriel tells Ferren about at the very early on in the book.
yeah.
I realised that Asmodai has been um, he feels that he's been unfairly treated in heaven,
Hmm.
and that's to do with his role in the weather wars. He
Hmm.
was actually a key figure in winning those wars for heaven, but he hasn't got the credit that he feels he deserves.
Hmm.
Then in book three, the weather wars come in again because
Okay.
Asmodai's power over the weather becomes crucial. He can create storms and he can create clouds, and that becomes a key thing in book three. So yeah, it's lovely when something just accidentally turns out to have all this potential for
Yeah.
growing and growing and growing. I love that.
Yes.
Sorry, I got a bit distracted there, didn't I? The question, do you want to go back to the question or?
Oh no, I just brought that up about how I loved how you gave you allowed readers to know a little bit more about Asmodai.
Hmm.
Um so I love it when I get to know the backstory behind different characters. But how does I do want to know how does um Asmodai's vulnerability paired with his mystical aura and strategic mind position him as a mirror to Miriel's struggle between power and isolation.
Well, I'd say that Asmodai's real vulnerability comes in when we learn the first truth about him. Do we want to move on to that? The first, I mean, he seemed so almost too good to be true.
Mhm.
He is different to all the other angels in the way that he can sympathize, he's kind, he's caring, always with a certain, I don't know, paternal superiority. I mean, he's kind of he's Muriel kind of admires him, adores him almost because of his beauty and because he has a kind of authority about him.
Mhm.
He seems to have a sort of an authority, and she's kind of in the subordinate position, just kind of loving him for what he is, and the fact that he's sympathizing with her and so on. But then it builds up to the stage where she learns he's lied to her.
Mhm.
He's lied about the fact that he isn't actually the angel of strategy that he said he was. He's a lower rank altogether.
Mhm.
And Miriel challenges him because she suddenly feels everything's fallen out
Mhm.
of the world. It's all what can she trust?
Yeah.
And that's what he has to confess. and he
Yeah.
confesses that he's actually a fallen angel.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when he becomes really vulnerable, because that is when has to admit that he's not this superior being who can give her love and kindness, but doesn't need love and kindness back. Now he's he's weak too. He's had his weakness, and the interesting thing about the kind of fallen angel he is, and this is something when I was doing all the research to begin with, I was fascinated by the Grigori, the Watchers, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole tiny strand in the Bible, but it's a very interesting and beautiful myth about God having sent angels down to earth to monitor, to mentor Adam and Eve and their children, and sort of bring them on slowly to evolve into knowledge, into sort of being capable of doing things and learning things. And the angels, 300 of them, came down and they met with the human beings,
Mm-hmm.
but they fell in love with mortal women.
Yeah, the Watchers.
The Watchers are the other word for the other name for them. Yeah, they were Watchers because they were watching over human beings
Hmm.
in the very early stages.
Yeah.
And I always felt that was kind of a beautiful myth, and kind of like the ongoing part of it is sort of beautiful too, because the the um, breeding, the sexual
Yeah.
connection between those mortal women and the angels
Hmm.
create monsters, and the
Yeah.
monsters were actually giants who
Yeah.
feature in the Bible and were involved in building the Tower of Babel.
Hmm.
But the revelation I mean, the thing is that they are fallen angels, but they're not followers of Satan.
Hmm.
In the Bible, they're in not the orthodox books of the Bible, but the sort of the apocrypha, the sort of surrounding books
Yes.
that are accepted in some religions, not in others, and some aren't accepted in any religion, any versions of Christianity, but they're still kind of on the edges of the Bible.
Hmm.
And in those books, the Grigori or Watchers are actually put in prison on the third level of heaven
Hmm.
rather than in hell. They are not fallen angels along with Satan. They're not as bad
Yeah.
as badly fallen. In fact, what they did was fall in love with mortal women,
Yeah.
which seemed like such a bad thing to do. And when Esmodai confesses that, Miriel, sort of all the doubts she's had about him kind of disappear, because all the things that hadn't quite gelled together suddenly fall into place. He's not the perfect being he was pretending to be. He doesn't have the influence in heaven that he was pretending to have.
Hmm.
He'd persuade people to the other angels to accept Muriel into heaven, but he doesn't have that sort of influence because he's not. He's an angel who's flawed like her, and that gives another cause of sympathy. But there's also that other thing which ties in really nicely, that the Grigori, the Watchers, fell in love with mortal women. And
Hmm.
the way Miriel is starting to feel about Asmodai, that means potentially he could fall in love with her. He
Hmm.
could fall in love, and he could fall in love. This is one of the key things in the novel, actually, is the difference between the communal love of angels
Hmm.
and person to person love, the individual love that we sort of value so highly between human beings, that sort of sense that I exist for this person. This person is all and all and all to me.
Hmm.
And that is a possibility if Asmodai fell in love with a mortal woman in that kind of way.
Hmm.
He could fall in love with Muriel in the same kind of way. And that's when she starts to realize that she is actually falling in love with him.
Yes.
And that's a key development. And I'd say that's when he's vulnerable. Rather than, I mean, earlier on, he's kind of a rather superior sort of being who can show kindness and compassion
Right.
and everything else to Muriel, but he doesn't need the same from her. Now he does. Now he actually needs her to forgive him for lying.
Mm.
And yes, that makes them more equal and more person to person.
Yes. And then he even shares a private angelic method of calling him.
Yes, yes, which is like puts an even closer
Mhm.
communication between them. I actually enjoyed, I don't know, I often do things like that. And I think it was a long period of my life when I was very interested in psychic things and supernatural things. And to sort of establish a connection in the mind. I don't know if you remember, and I don't totally remember it all myself, but Asmodai sort of plants a seed in Miral's mind that
Mhm.
is a small part of him, and he takes a small part of her into his mind. And it's sort of like a tiny glowing light that sort of expands to the form of a very small angel in the mind, a sort of a thought in the mind. But I love that psychic sort of stuff. I love kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
delving into sort of possibilities that are in the mind, that are sort of subjective and almost sort of ghostly supernatural.
Yes.
And that as you said, that form of communication between them is a very intense sort of intimacy,
Hmm.
which actually explains quite a lot about Asmodai in book three as well. But we won't go there. Not yet.
Right. There's so much I want to ask, but I am so careful not to I don't want to give away all the spoilers.
I
But I
think
do.
we I think we have to. I think we have to because we're talking about this book. You know what happens in it. I know what happens in it, and I like just chatting about it. And we'll pretend there aren't any listeners or readers out there. We'll just pretend that you and I know what really goes on. Let's say it outright.
Mhm.
Actually, I mean, everyone who's read this book has said they were absolutely flabbergasted when
Mhm.
they read the scene where Asmodee's true nature is finally revealed. Because,
Yes.
in a sense, this period when he's made his confession and
Mhm.
Muriel feels she can fall in love with him, um, you sort of feel, yes, it's a real possibility. And yes, in a sense, everything I was doubting about Asmodee has suddenly been explained away. He's not so perfect an angel after
Yeah.
all. He's got all these flaws,
Yeah.
but that makes him human in a way. And you think, it's all resolved. He is good. He isn't. Underneath it all, we pull the second drug away,
You know,
and
I think
I
he
mean,
reminds. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say he is an absolute monster, and that's that scene where it's revealed. I always felt that I can't say exactly why, but some visual images
Mhm.
go with what's happening. The sort of scenery seems to impact on the revelation. And here it was Mirael and Asmodai walking away from the Nestor's camp, the
Mhm.
Nestor's territory, and they're going through green fields and sort of with green hills. Asmodai is taking her to where he has built a flying wing, which he's going to use to lift her up into heaven. And the green hills are dotted with scarlet flowers. And for me, somehow, those scarlet flowers are very, very important on the red on the green. I can just see it.
Mhm.
And it goes with the revelation of his ultimate betrayal.
Yes.
Because as it turns out, when she gets to one valley, just a little valley away from where the flying wing is going to take her up to heaven,
Hmm.
he suddenly stops and calls down the artificial human to come and take her captive. And
Yes.
he has totally turned. He's totally in from being caring and sympathetic and vulnerable. He's suddenly a monster,
Um,
and
yeah.
it's an absolute betrayal. And I guess
Hmm.
did I ever say in talking before that I'm not actually religious in my head. I'm sort of my head would tell me is not a belief. I don't really believe in religions in the ultimate analysis. I'd call myself an agnostic, but my heart does. I've always sort of had this really deep response to religious iconography and the images of religion and all that traditional mythology. it really moves me deeply. And one thing that works for me most powerfully are biblical stories, not just the imagery, but the stories where you get the sort of classic cases of betrayal, for example.
Hmm.
And Asmodai, I hope, is a classic case of betrayal. It is the ultimate betrayal. It really is a betrayal beyond betrayals. And yeah, I like that sort of I don't know how to describe it, sort of biblically epic kind of emotional impact.
But I did want to say this about Asmodai, and I think I see I have this habit when I start out reading something, even when I'm watching a movie, I try to call I try to call it, like with Asmodai. I know you said, yeah, he's a good angel, but he reminds me of an imperfect human being. We have the ability to be good, but we also have a depraved nature. And
Mm,
sometimes we give in to the depravity more
mm,
so than the good. And
mm,
and that to me, that's how Asmodai came off. Like, I have this ability to be compassionate and empathetic and all these good characteristics, but I also have this dark side of me as well. So by the time I got to part three, Muriel Gone, I can I just say I was not surprised. I was
right.
not surprised at the outcome.
Mm.
I really was not, because I'm like, okay, but that could be because I read or watch too many movies
Well,
similar.
like me, you're an author. So there's one part of you is a reader. There's another part that is kind of thinking what I would be doing with this as an author and where
Yeah,
I might be
yeah.
going to make it go as an author. So yeah, I mean, I'm two people. If I watch a movie, like I watch a lot of detective and crime fiction, and I sort of
Uh-huh.
in some ways I can be very, very dumb about guessing ahead because I can get totally immersed in the story and the
Hmm.
characters. I just sort of go along with what's happening. But at the same time, at other times I can be very, very cluey about guessing
Hmm.
what is going to come out eventually,
Hmm.
just because that author side of me can sort of think about the
Yeah.
plot at the same time. And it's not a good thing to do. I mean, I wish I didn't do it at all. I'd rather be just a simple watcher and reader. But yeah, it's our curse. We don't quite read like ordinary people.
No, we don't, because I'm constantly, it could be two or three lines in, and my cogs are churning, and I'm thinking, okay, what is the motive behind this? Could it be this? Could it be that?
Yeah.
And by three chapters later, I knew it.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, it kind of undercuts things. You sort of like you guess ahead and like you feel
Yeah.
satisfied when the guess turns out right, but it's not quite the same as being totally surprised when it turns out. But
No.
you know what you were saying there, it's something I sort of believe in, and it's come into other things that I've written.
Hmm.
That sometimes people can be. It's actually in a book that I've started writing right now.
Hmm.
Someone, um, I'll say a guy because it's in both cases a guy, a male, and in some ways maybe that's not accidental, but someone can be very, very caring and sympathetic and thoughtful and can be really sort of in tune with
Yeah.
a person,
Hmm.
and yet they can also totally cut out. In other words, it's a sort of a it's a genuine sensitivity, and I think Asmodai, in a way, the way he responds to Muriel is genuinely sensitive. He's an
Hmm.
angel. He's kind of got his antenna very much clued into where she is at, and he can sort
Hmm.
of empathize with her in that way. But he can also cut out. He can
Yeah.
also he can also leave it behind and
Mm,
do something absolutely monstrous for his own sake, regardless of that. And I think that's yes, maybe a moral lesson I do tend to want to preach, that don't always trust sensitivity.
mm.
Don't always trust guys who are sensitive and caring and sharing, because sometimes it's not the whole story.
Hmm. So let's talk more. You did mention her captivity. So her mind shifts from grief and shock to determination, even vowing to remain whole despite the selector's attempt to extract her memories.
Mm.
How do these chapters or these scenes in part three reveal Muriel's inner strength and transformation? And what role does memory play in preserving identity when all physical freedom is lost?
Mm. I guess Mimel has I mean, Fern has a sort of a gritty kind of determination. Mimel is more a spiritual being still, and
Yeah.
she actually feels that she doesn't have the willpower and the strength that human beings have, but she does have her own sort of resistance.
Mm,
And yes, she's I guess that little bit of mortality in her makes her determined to survive, and makes her determined to come through with staying who she is, being true to herself.
mm-hmm.
And yes, I mean, I guess the thing about the Asmodai betrayal, I mean, yes, she's been sold off to Dr. Saniet of the Human, and she's going to be dissected into minute slices to analyze exactly how she works. But
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, that isn't quite the worst thing. The worst thing is that she totally trusted someone, the kind of
Yeah.
trust that you have when you fall in love with them.
Yeah.
And, for that time, they are everything to you. And then suddenly it's it was never there. It's not just taken away, it was never there. It didn't exist. And that is so psychologically damaging. I mean, it's like an emotional trauma of the worst kind. And she's got to get through that too. And I guess that's the biggest thing she has to survive
Mm-hmm.
is is pulling herself out from the the sheer sort of emotional shock of what
Yeah.
Asmodai has done to her.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
of course, she does fight back a little bit when he comes to visit her while she's waiting in Dr. Saniet's surgery,
mm,
and talks to her, and he reveals a bit more about his true self, which is, I guess, for me, that's the true monstrosity. I mean, in a sense, it seems to me right that he's a spiritual being.
mm-hmm.
He's not a brute. He's not sort of driven by his instincts or his urges, or sort of anything like that. He's absolutely the opposite of being a brute.
Mm-hmm.
He's hyper sophisticated, hyper intelligent, and in
Yeah.
some senses hypersensitive. And he's probably other angels wouldn't even have been aware that Mirail was falling in love with them. If
Mm-hmm.
it had been some other angel, they wouldn't have even picked up her responses and her reactions and her growing feelings towards him.
Right.
But he does. And the thing is that he can't feel it, because being an angel, angels don't know that kind of love. That sort of personal love doesn't exist amongst angels. It only exists in Muriel because she's just a little bit humanized by eating human food, and
Yeah.
the fact that she's got a little bit of mortality into her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he's purely spiritual and he can't feel love. And yet he delights in the fact that he can watch her falling in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is an ultimate form of monstrosity. I can't think of anything much more evil than that. I mean,
It
that
is.
is that
Yeah.
is using another person to
Mm-hmm.
the infinite degree.
Yes, because he when he visits her, he kind of like mocks her for falling in love. And while he's you know revealing to her his whole motivation and the full extent behind his manipulation. So it becomes personal, spiritual, and possibly political. So can you tell me what emotional toll does this betrayal take on Miriel? We know she's shocked and by the whole thing, and how does this moment deepen the reader's understanding of the complex power dynamics between angels, human, and the resistance?
Well, yes, I guess in terms of, I started out thinking of the Foreign trilogy as two opposing forces, heaven versus earth. Then, sort of from the start, almost, it turned out that there were actually two forces on the earth.
Hmm.
One were the artificial human that rule the earth, wage the war, and the others are the residuals, the descendants of the original human beings living in degraded conditions like Fremen and his tribe. So Earth became complex.
Hmm.
Heaven becomes complex too, in that you have the all the other angels, but
Hmm.
you also have Asmodai. And Asmodai is, if you like, spirit in a bad form. He's a spiritual being, but instead of sharing with other angels, he is an absolute monster of ego. He's kind of developed a tendency that well is sets him completely aside, and he becomes another force,
Hmm.
and he is not on side with heaven either. He is deeply rebelling against heaven.
Hmm.
And it's the other force that came in again. It's see it coming through in book two, the morphs, and the morphs are the human souls who can't get back up into heaven. And yeah, actually, can I sort of wander a little bit here? The morphs started out as something for Ferren to part of Ferren's travelogue in book one when he's traveling from his home to the camp of the human. I needed things to happen along the way, and I
Hmm.
thought of the morphs, and the morphs are these little tiny seeming creatures. I say tiny because you can't actually see them and they're invisible.
Hmm.
They exist in the interstices between things, so that they kind of attach themselves to a leaf here and a twig there and a bit of root there and a stone there, and they're sort of like a snowflake geometrical form when you can see them. And they're very, very sad because I realize these are human souls and they can't get back up into heaven because ever since the war between heaven and earth started, heaven has shut them out. They're too dangerous to allow up into heaven.
Hmm.
And all they want to do is get back into their home. And they're such sad little things, and they cry out in their sad little voices, and they're homeless. And I loved that. But it was only to begin with an episode on the way to the human camp. And my editor said, morphs ought to be more than this. You've got something really good here. You ought to see where you can take them. And I thought, yes, I mean, human souls that can't get back up into heaven, they ought to be more than just these things you visit on the way through on a journey. And so in book two, they turn into something much bigger. They become the what Asmodee is trying to collect as a power to source his flying wing,
Hmm.
because they actually, though they're so pathetic and so kind of seemingly helpless and harmless, they
Hmm.
actually have a spiritual power as human souls. And Asmodee has found a way to harness that and use it to power things.
Hmm.
So they grew more in book two. And of course, in book three, they become another force yet again. So they're a separate force, neither earth, neither heaven, neither the residuals,
Yeah.
not Asmodite, but a separate force yet again.
Hmm.
And like I said, isn't it wonderful when things kind of take off and you didn't know
Yeah.
where they were going to take off and how big they were going to be in the end?
Right, right. And I feel like it still fits. It's well needed in the story because you have all these different things going on, but it doesn't detract from the whole premise at all. I think it aligns very well. But I do want to go back to the when Farron and Keat confronts the archangels for a minute after Asmodee's ultimate betrayal. And they're confronting Cedrion and Bethor and Uriel. Um, and so, how does that scene explore the limitations of celestial authority in contrast with human courage, such as with the residuals? And what were you aiming to show by having Farron and Keat or Kiet stand up to
Yeah,
divine Kit? Uh,
but it usually say as Kiet, yeah.
Kiet, okay. So what were you aiming to show by having Farron and Kiet stand up to divine figures such as Cedrion, Bethor, and Uriel, who refused to act?
Yeah. I mean, they in that scene they don't originally stand up. They are terrified. If you remember, they sort of they don't want to have to walk out there. They're sort of
Mhm,
peeking out and they get seen and they're summoned out and just walking up close to these beings of power is terrifying and they're in awe of them. But then when it turns out that they know what's happened to Mirael, that she's been taken off to the human camp and what Dr. Saniet is going to do with her,
mhm,
Aaron is can't believe that they wouldn't try and rescue her. And Kiet feels the same. And that is where they sort of start standing up for themselves.
mhm,
They're not quite so overawed anymore. They feel, you know, there's something lacking in these beings. And yes, there is. They're angels and they see everything from a great height, but they don't see the personal need, the
mhm,
personal, if you've had personal contact with Muriel all along, you can't just let her be taken away and analysed and dissected and submitted to a doctor's research.
mhm,
And that's where they start, in a sense, they stand for human values as against the fairly clear-cut logic of heaven. Heaven has ethics, and to me that's important. I mean, Femin sort of represents the human side of things.
yeah,
Heaven has its ethics, and they are rigid and they are excessively clear cut,
mhm,
and it produces bad effects. But they are ultimately on the side of good. I didn't want heaven to be simply a negative. I just wanted to show that this kind of ethics has to expand to include
mhm,
human flaws, human frailties,
oh yeah,
and
mhm,
personal feelings in the way that humans have personal feelings.
mhm,
So yes. Actually, can I say something about Kiet? Because
yeah,
she's the other main new character in this book,
mhm,
and I, in some ways, she's an ordinary character living a lot of ordinary experience that girls and women go through. I mean, she's when she was young, her parents were taken away by selectors
mhm,
and she went crazy. She just tried to attack the selectors with a beam of wood and got hauled back before the selectors could destroy her and the rest of the tribe.
mhm,
But she's from that time on, she's known as having a temper, and in her tribe that has to be controlled. And isn't that the sort of fate of so
yeah,
many girls that are told you have to control your tempers because you have to behave like a proper girl and not sort of explode and blow out and do um, unpredictable things. You have to
mhm,
be a nice girl.
yeah,
And Kiet has kind of been forced into that straitjacket, and she sort of has taken it on to a degree. I mean, she's
mhm,
had to learn to live with her society. She's had to learn to go along with it, but deep down, she's still got the fire in her belly that she always had,
oh,
and
absolutely, hmm,
so that's kind of part of her. And then another part of her that really seems to me like an experience that's well, it's so painful because Femin, in some ways, I like Ferren, but yeah, in some ways he's like me in this as a boy. He kind of he he's prone to unrealistic ideas of love. And his unrealistic idea of love is that he can be in love with an angel. And she's a spiritual being. She's a different kind of being altogether. He can't. And his version of that is, well, he will be totally devoted to her, like a knight serving his lady, and
Mhm.
never ask anything, but always serving her. And it's all in his head. That's the trouble. That's what boys do.
Yeah.
Right? They get things in their heads and they go with it. And that don't know that from experience of like how boys can sort of have a belief in their minds and run with it, um, and fail to see what's completely in front of their eyes. And what's in his front of his eyes all the time is that he's actually very close, has a close feeling with Kiet. They get on really well together and could very well be in love with each other.
Mm.
But of course, he's in love with someone else, isn't he? And in his mind, he can't actually see the potential for a real
Mhm.
human love.
Mhm.
And Kiet, like if any practical-minded girl can see that this
Yeah.
is, he's saying, but it's the old thing, I suppose. Boys are not very emotionally self-aware, and Helen is not very emotionally self-aware, and Kiet sees quite clearly that there's a relationship growing up between us. It's there, it's real, it's solid. And
Mhm.
Farron's off with the fairies with this sort of like ideal version of a love, and that's so painful for Kiet to go through, to have to listen to Farron talking about his love for an angel. And she's thinking, yeah, but I'm here, I'm real, you know, this could actually be a real thing between us. Get out of your head, come back to earth. So that's kind of where Farron really he sort of he exemplifies a boy of that age, a teenager, and how things like that get into your head and get into boys' heads and sort of lead them lead them off the planet. And
Yeah.
Kiet has her feet firmly on the ground, and yet she's forced to suffer because he doesn't just see, he just can't see
Yeah.
what's there. He just out of his touch with his emotions, and she isn't, and it's very hard to be Kiet in that situation.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about Dr. Signette in part four.
Right.
Um, so when Miriel is wheeled into Dr. Signette's surgical dome, where she comes face to face with an augmented female hyper, I want to get that right. How does this moment portray the evolving nature of hyper augmentation, and how does it foreshadow the psychological and physical violation Muriel is about to endure?
Well, I mean, one thing about a sequel is that you have to have new things coming in, and one new thing is new weapons on the human side. And so the augmented female hyper is, I call her a queen hyper, but certainly, I mean, it seems to me kind of grotesque that here's a hyper. The male hypers are just brutal, just sort of thugs,
Mhm.
like with spikes and sort of scars, and tattoos, and I mean um, they're just thugs. The female hyper is in some ways more sinister, and whereas the male ordinary hypers decorate themselves with tattoos and slogans and graffiti and even sort of blood coming out of their mouths and sort of horrible things, just putting on horror images, a bit like dressing up in Halloween style.
Mhm.
The female queen hyper, we call her female because she's
Mhm.
being a queen hyper, puts on lipstick and has sort of false eyelashes and all things like that. And that's to me a rather grotesque and not very pleasant image, because here it is on a black rubberized face,
Mhm.
just painted on. And yeah, I never. They are queen hypers. I don't particularly think of them as female. They're sort of cat-like in the way they move, and they're much more dangerous than the ordinary hypers.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other things that come in too in the form of new weapons. But I guess Dr. Saniet is himself the ultimate new threat. I mean,
Yeah.
the doctors in part one were sort of frail and feeble
Yeah.
and sort of they basically needed to function with life support systems in their wheelchairs and all got destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So we had for something new and something bigger and better. And I was
Yeah.
really, really pleased when I came up with Dr. Sanier because and he is bigger, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a giant. Um, that brings in all the sort of childhood feelings about giants that we all had when we were like
Yeah.
kind of in sort of really young years.
Mm,
But yes, he's a different kind of figure. And I guess the important thing about him is, again, he exemplifies something that I've been playing with all along. The idea that there's an urge, there can be an urge for knowledge, which is really an urge for power and control. It came through well, I suppose with the original, go back to the really, really, really backstory, when the whole war between heaven and earth started, when human scientists, medical scientists, discovered how to revive a brain that had died and discovered that there really was a heaven and there really were angels,
mhm,
then they sent up psychonauts, and the psychonauts had to bring back information. And they destroyed parts of heaven, feeding it into their measuring machines.
mhm,
And that was the start of a war because their form of knowledge was a form of conquest. And it was the same with Dr. Saniet. His form of knowledge is a form of not conquest. He has to know everything. That's the thing about Dr. Saniet. He has to have everything under control by having everything known so that nothing can ever surprise him. Nothing can ever take him by attack. Nothing can ever sort of impinge on his total security. He needs to have everything known so that everything is safe and secure and under his control.
mhm,
And that's kind of, I mean, I feel there is that thing about knowledge that sometimes knowledge can be simply a matter of controlling. And you would say that Dr. Saniet seeks a form of power. He also seeks a form of power because he's so insecure in himself. If he doesn't have control, then, well, he falls apart and pretty much literally falls apart. He goes out of control. His mind requires complete control over everything, and it is a very much a mind thing. Everything has to be in his mind, known, and then it's secure and it's safe, and he's in charge of it. And yeah, I'm very suspicious about that. Thinking you can have everything in your mind, and it's a kind of paranoia to know and therefore feel safe and secure. It's a delusion,
mhm.
a dangerous delusion.
Now I do want to get I have to mention Shanna. Is it Shanna or
Yeah,
Shanna?
Shannon. Yeah, Shannon.
I
Yeah.
have to mention Shanna before we go. During the high speed chase or escape through the hyper camp, um, there's moments of fear, chaos, and resilience. How do these scenes highlight Shanna's leadership and technical prowess? And what do they reveal about the way Farron and his allies adapt under pressure?
Well, they certainly show Ferran and his team's ability to adapt under pressure. With Shanna, she's an unusual case because Ferran and his followers are in some ways always typical humans. I mean, they can be brave, but they have to push themselves to be brave. They have to they are brave in the way that we can be brave.
Hmm.
Maybe I couldn't be quite as brave, but they can be brave, and we all have that potential in us.
Mhm.
But Shanna has in some ways had to sacrifice some of her humanity, I think, because what has happened is we find out is that when she was taken away from Ferren and the family in book one and sent for military service, she managed to escape and see what the human beings were actually doing. And what they were doing was taking subjects for military service and putting them into a white enamel bath and covering them over with a sort of packing them in like sardines, covering them over with this shimmering stuff, and eventually pumping out their thoughts and memories and experience.
Mhm.
And that's the power source that actually fuels the hypers. They're not alive except by the thoughts and memories and experiences that have been stolen from real human residual. And then, of course, she sees them being chopped up into the poor residuals being chopped up and taken apart in order to use their tissues and their organs and so on in forming plasmatics. And that is a shocking scene when Femin sees it in book one. And in book two, Shanna, we find out, has seen exactly the same thing and she's vowed revenge. And in her revenge, she has actually managed to live for 1.5 years in the human camp, carrying out acts of sabotage. So she's kind of had to totally isolate herself from the human race. She's had to totally isolate herself from normal experience.
Mhm.
And in a sense, she's become that sort of assassin figure.
Yeah.
Cold, ruthless, hard, incredibly durable and incredibly efficient. But she's had to sacrifice some of her humanity to become that.
Mhm.
So that's the sort of state that she's in.
Yeah.
And yeah, can I just say something about that last part altogether? You mentioned like um, excitement of all the events in part four when they're rescuing Mirel.
Uh-huh.
That that's I guess sort of like a signature note for me. I love big rolling climaxes. I mean, things that just go on and on and on and build up and up and up, and
Yeah.
everything sort of works together. And that actually I find that is when I just love being a writer. When I've set everything up right, and in the Felon books, it's pretty much each time the last quarter of the book, everything just unfolds and unfurls and rolls up bigger and bigger and bigger, and I feel like I don't have to write it. It's just telling itself. And for me, it's like hanging onto a toboggan that's going downhill, and I'm just kind of, I call it the toboggan glide because it's like hanging on, and the story is telling itself. And those big rolling climaxes are a kind of thing you would find in pretty much any Richard Harland novel because I love doing it and I always do it. I love reading books that give me that, so I love doing it myself. And yeah, the rescue kind of just keeps on developing and developing and developing, and it starts off as a straightforward rescue. It turns into something else. It turns
Yeah.
into something else again, and in the end, it brings down Dr. Saniet, and we find out the truth about Dr. Saniet,
Yeah. I
which we don't have to do a spoil on that because it's not that important to talking about it. But the Dr. Saniet is not what he seems. He's a
oh
giant,
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
not a simple giant.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep I'm gonna keep that, locked, But that's all the questions that I have for book two, Farron and the Doomsday Mission. I really enjoyed reading it. I'm going to reread book three because I have some more notes that I'm going to take, as we pick up with part three, um, of the Farron trilogy, and I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. But I do want to stop here with book two. I really enjoyed you discussing it and breaking it down. So this has been fun and very interesting.
Well, it's nice talking to another author because it's there are things you sort of it's taken me a long while to learn
Mm.
so many ins and outs of writing, and yes, book two went through a lot of versions and changes to get to where it was. And my problem with book two is that when I'd finished book one, I was then told, "Oh, do a sequel,"
Hmm.
and that's with something like a fantasy world. That is not easy to do because everything sort of seemed to wrap up the end of book one, and all of a sudden I've got to go back and produce all these new ideas. And I did. I really managed to produce all these new ideas, but it took a long while, a lot of versions and a lot of rewritings to actually get them working the way they needed to work. Because, well, as I said, I sort of started out continuing on from book one with a focus on building the residual alliance.
Hmm.
But the residual alliance is not really the true focus of the book. And I kind of had to find that out and find out what needed to be brought forward. And yeah, you know that sort of thing. That some things turn up in books, and you kind of realize after you've just about finished writing, oh wait a minute, that was really really good. I should make a big thing of that, and I did. I was able to go back and revise it and rewrite it, and let the things that had so much potential realize their potential.
Yeah. Yeah, you did really well. You did really well.
Uh,
I really enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.